Hi, everyone. I just got back from a community event this morning in Carnegie where residents were talking with candidates and with local elected officials about the issues that they're facing in their everyday lives and how the state needs to step up and help them out a little bit. Um, if you're curious what's going on with my ceiling and the hole that seems to be opening up, um, me too. That's actually a really good question. I just bought this fixer-upper in the city, and it's a fresh nightmare every day. um, but enough of that. Uh, a lot of different issues were discussed this morning. Affordability came up a lot. People are struggling. Housing, electric bills, water bills, stuff that the state should be keeping an eye on, and yet they are not. Public education came up quite a lot. The fact that our public schools do not have enough money to give a proper education to our students. At the same time that our state is funneling $700 million every single year to private schools instead. Um, One issue that came up that I haven't discussed and I'd like to say a little bit about is a gentleman who was a volunteer fireman stood up and asked about the issues that they're facing and what the state can do to help. Um, there's a real problem across our state with volunteer fire departments and fire departments generally. There just is not enough money. Uh, Not enough people are volunteering. There isn't enough outreach to get volunteers and staff. They don't have money to put fuel in the tank. They don't have money to maintain their trucks, do any of the things that a fire department needs to do to put out fires and protect our communities. Um, and it got me thinking about one issue that's kind of tangential, but it's very much related. If you'll stick with me for a second, is skill games and the taxation thereof. I don't know if you've heard about this issue or if you've seen these kind of consoles where people just kind of press buttons. Uh, they're popping up in gas stations and pubs across the state, and it's gambling, but it's completely untaxed, unlike every other form of gambling in the state. Casinos are taxed, sports gambling, these apps are all taxed, all of it, except these quote unquote skill games. And if you've ever seen them or played with them, the word skill doesn't necessarily come to mind, but I digress. Um, and why aren't they taxed? Every single year, our state says that they're going to start taxing them at the same level that they tax other gambling forms, but every single year they don't. And once again, the reason is money, corporate interests, and lobbyists. The corporations that own and operate these skill game consoles have sent a army of well-heeled and well-paid lobbyists to wine and dine our elected officials in Harrisburg, and they've done an excellent job, and therefore they're not taxed, and they've done the job for their corporate overlords over there. Um, and one particular argument that these lobbyists have made, which is really disingenuous and disgusting, frankly, is that they found one volunteer fire department that had to set up one of these skill game consoles in their firehouse. I believe because they had a truck that broke down and they needed to maintain it or buy a new one, and they just didn't have enough money because the state doesn't give them enough money. Their county, their municipality doesn't give them enough money, and so they had to basically moonlight as a casino. They had to open up um, a kind of a side hustle where they operate this kind of gambling situation inside their firehouse just to make the ends meet, just so that they can protect our communities from fires. Um, and the first question you have to ask yourself is, why do we live in a state where the people that we trust and who have stood up and volunteered for no money to protect us from fires, why do they have to, like I said, moonlight as casino owners just to make the ends meet? It's not how it should be. But of course, these lobbyists said, oh, if you start taxing us, then this one firehouse in the state won't be able to, maintain this skill game console, and therefore they won't be able to buy a new truck. Um, let's set aside the fact that these lobbyists don't give a flying fuck about volunteer firemen or about the residents of the state. What they care about is the profit of the corporation that's paying their bills, and they don't want that profit to be eaten away by paying their fair share in tax. And so uh, and so they kind of set up this disingenuous argument. Um, and the real problem is that the fact that we live in a state where our firemen and our firewomen and our departments aren't getting enough money to protect us. And so the obvious solution, or one solution to get dedicated funding is, yeah, we have to start taxing these gambling machines that are popping up, completely unregulated. We have to start taxing them at the same level, and then we can dedicate that money, or at least a portion thereof, to this existing issue so that we can fund all fire departments across the state, not just this one that has, a console in their firehouse, but all of them. And we can set up funding for programs for outreach to get more volunteers, to get more staff. We can start paying these people, by the way. They're risking their lives, and they're doing it for no money at the same time that our communities have devolved into this late stage capitalism society where corporations are feeding off of us and sucking on us every single day, and we're just barely scraping by. And these people are dedicating their time and their efforts and their sweat and their blood, and they're not even asking for money, and we can't even pay for that. We live in a state where we can't even pay for our volunteer fire departments. They are not getting paid, and we somehow still can't pay for that. It's disgusting. It's despicable. And a very easy solution is to start taxing these skill games and to dedicate at least some of that funding to go straight to these community organizations that are protecting us from, fire. So that was just on my mind. I thought I would hop on a thing and say that. And this is just one of the many examples of the ways that our state legislature is failing us across the board. And they constantly say, we don't have enough money for this, we don't have enough money for that. And yet they constantly have enough money to write checks for corporate handouts, for tax credits for corporations and wealthy individuals. But no, we don't have enough money to give fire protective equipment to the people who are breaking in windows and rescuing, the people who are trapped inside. It's a profound failure of leadership, and it's a profound misalignment of priorities, really. And if I were elected as your state senator, I certainly wouldn't respond to the calls from these lobbyists from Skill Games or any other corporate interest that has taken over and bought and paid for our representatives and state senators in Harrisburg. Instead, I would be looking out for the volunteer fire people, like the gentleman that stood up today. And finally, bringing back some relief and some funding for our community groups and relief for our residents that they desperately need. So thanks a lot. I'm going to be out again canvassing this afternoon, getting signatures to get on the ballot. So if you see me, say hey. All right, bye.